I'm really excited now. You told me you're down in beautiful Nashville. I'm the big cowboy country music fan, so I'm jealous. I'm not down there with you.
What's your favorite country, modern or past?
I do like the modern stuff. I am a big George Strait fan. I'm sure you saw the Country Music Awards the other night where everybody's speculating that he was not too happy. He was making some faces, making it look like he wasn't happy with his new music. But I mean, I like both, but I'm a huge George Strait fan.
George Strait. I think a lot of the old timers in country are a lot like old time hockey players, where they say there's not enough grit in the music and there's not enough texture. It's become very poppy almost.
Yeah. Well, if you watch George Strait when he sings, he just stands up there and sings, right? All these new people are dancing around and all this kind of stuff. I'm sure he's looking at him like, "What the heck are you doing?" Like it's just.
What do you think about Jelly Roll?
I admire him. He's been through a lot of stuff and didn't quit. What is he's in his 30s now, right? And
Yeah.
now didn't he win just Newcomer of the Year award or something? So I admire that story where he battled through stuff. Uh, I guess I'm that old farm boy where, and I hope I say this the right way. I'll be very careful. Again, I admire people that have been through things. So he had a drug addiction and all that kind of stuff. But I also admire the people who, like George Strait, who just appeared, hey, they just came and did their job. They didn't make any mistakes. Again, this is awful. And it's not just, it seems like a lot of people, they've been through things and they kind of use those things that they've been through for their career, which, it's showbiz. I just like the guys who, like the George Straits, that show up every day and do their job. But again, I admire Jerry Roll. Good stuff. I love listening to his music. So it's cool.
Interesting point that you said that, and I'm not going to name names, but I have a limo service here in Nashville, and I
Oh,
drive around a lot of bands and a lot of country stars.
right.
And I actually had a band last week in the car, and we were talking, and they actually said something very similar, where they said that it seems like Jelly is being manufactured
Yeah.
as a good guy story
Yeah.
after such a shady past, and that they wish everybody got the same playing field because we're four going church going guys,
Yeah.
but our reputation would be nerdy and nobody would care about us. But if we were ex drug addicts, that it would be. So it's a fine line. It's a really fine line.
Yeah, I noticed that I've just completed writing a book, and I noticed that it really forced me to kind of look back at my life, people I was exposed to younger, the influence of my father and grandfather on the farm, and all those things, and it is funny in today's world. And the guy that doesn't show up all the time, or the person that doesn't show up all the time, and has done bad things, when he finally shows up and does good things, well, everybody's just, wow, what a fantastic person. But the guy, like we're talking, the person that shows up every day and does what he's supposed to do every day, who is equally as talented or contributes just as much as anybody else, really doesn't get heralded as much as everybody else, right? Because he's there all the time, so nobody really pays attention to it because he just shows up all the time. So
It's
interesting.
it's kind of like the equivalency of Bob Probert in the NHL.
Yeah,
Bob got so many second, third, fourth
yeah,
chances, and people always seem to be like, "Oh, Bob's coming back and good for Bob." Well, maybe it wasn't good for Bob. Maybe Bob should have got his life straightened out. Unfortunately, it's a shame. He's one of my favorite players of all
yeah.
time because of the style he played and who he was. But you almost wish that Bob would have been able to get a little straightened out a little sooner in life, maybe.
Yeah, and that is the hard part with being an athlete or a celebrity of any kind, where people keep giving you second chances. Where if they really cared about the person, like if they really cared about Bob Probert, they would have not, like, he should not gone back on the ice. He should have got completely fixed, all the treatment he needed, and then maybe resume his career. But I mean, that's a professional world, right? I mean, it's the same thing with guys getting concussions now, where look at Philip Hedl with the Rangers has had what, 3 or 4 concussions now, and
Yeah.
you know, and I get it. Like as a player, I was the same way. You want to play like you think you're invincible, but where's everybody going to be in 20 years and 30 years and 40 years if he has some kind of brain damage and CTE potentially or whatever, and all those everybody that loves him at when he's playing with the New York Rangers, and it doesn't mean people are bad people. It just means everybody's moved on. He's not a player anymore, so
Right.
hopefully he has a
It's a shame with him. I'm glad you brought up Hedel. I mean, he's a kid that when this guy's healthy,
yeah,
he's the most dominant center on that team.
yeah.
There's nobody that can stick
Love him.
handle
Big
like that
kid.
kid. There's nobody who can dish the puck or shoot as quick. His release is incredible.
Yeah, big kid, can skate, drives to the net. Seems like he's a real competitive kid, and just and I don't blame him too. I kind of wonder now, and this is human nature. I wouldn't blame him at all. Then whenever he gets hit now, if he has any kind of feeling that okay, my head's hurt, he now pulls back. And again, I don't blame him for what he's been through at all. And again, it was so much different back when we played. I mean, we were playing in the playoffs, and I always had to play against Bob Nystrom all the time. You know, I was the physical defenseman, and we were beating him in a playoff series, and I knew it was coming. I was hitting everybody. We were at the guard late in the game, like a minute to go, and he came and just drilled me in the corner like a forearm shiver to the jaw. And I went down briefly, finished the game, but then after the game, I passed out in the locker room. They had to take me to the hospital, spent the night in the hospital, and then came back and played 2 nights later. We just didn't know any better. Like we didn't know about
Right.
CT or like that. So it was just well, you got a headache, have a beer, you'll be fine. And
I'm 54 years old, and I remember my first game. I can actually remember I was 3 years old with the Rangers. Being able to function and take in what the game was. But I remember my favorite announcer of all time was Jim Gordon.
oh yeah,
Jim Gordon and Bill Chadwick were my childhood. They mean more to me than anything in the world when it
sure,
comes to the Rangers. And I remember Jim's famous saying was, "I'm just going to use you as an example. Tom Laidlaw's out tonight. He got his bell rung."
yeah, oh yeah,
And that was the term back in the day for like you just got reamed, you have a concussion, but they didn't know what
yeah.
concussions were back then,
No,
you know?
yeah, and that was kind of a badge of honor that you fought through not just concussions but all injuries. He on that play, I actually saw a video. It's interesting you bring him up because I saw a video of that play where Nystrom hit me, and it's kind of well, it was a compliment. Jim Gordon goes, "Tommy's down. He's hurt, and that's a hard man to hurt," he says. And I was like, "Wow, that's cool," you know. But now you look back at it, it's like,
He
and
also coined the phrase "farm boy tough" when you were
yeah,
fighting McSorley.
yeah,
He's like, McSorley's this, and this. And he goes, but Tom Laidlaw is farm boy tough. I'll never forget that. And we'll get to that fight later, but you know, you came out of Northern Michigan, and I've heard you tell some stories in other podcasts about your college days and little wild Tommy Laidlaw. And
oh yeah.
what was it the difference of going from playing college hockey directly to New Haven for one game,
Yep.
and then you're a New York Ranger with one of the most famous coaches in the history of the world?
Well, it was all a whirlwind. You know, it's like anybody. You dream of being an NHL player. You know, it's not just limited to Canada, but growing up in Canada on the farm, playing hockey since you're 6 years old. You know, that's all you ever dream of doing. That's it. And I remember when I went to college, you may have heard the story. We had a great guy on our team who's passed away now at college, is Doug Harris, very intelligent guy. And we were just sitting on the dorms one day, and he just passingly said, and he wasn't criticizing me or anything, but he said, well, no, but Tom, nobody from this team's ever going to play in the National Hockey League. Well, I lost my mind on him. I snapped, and I was just totally out of control. It wasn't fair to him. And I said, I'm playing in the NHL. That's it. Don't you ever say that kind of stuff. So that was my focus all along. But still, you know, when you first get there, again, not like today, they have so much access to what the pro game is really all about. You know, what it looks like in the locker room. We knew nothing. I really thought I was going to go into the NHL locker room and guys are going to be wearing like gold underwear or something. That's actually what I thought. I thought, like, these guys are so much different. You realize now they're just human beings like everybody else. They're just very good at their jobs. So it was real whirlwind. Great. They were fantastic to me. The Rangers were very smart in sending me to New Haven. I was burnt out from we had a great senior year at college. We were ranked number one in the country and lost in the final game of the national championship. But so I didn't get a lot out of, as far as playing, I didn't get a lot out of going to New Haven. But the whole experience of going, like they brought me to New York, brought me in the Ranger locker room the day of a game, signed the contract, went to New Haven. So it just that okay. So now that kind of awe of now finally being in the NHL environment was over with. So next year I could come in training camp and make the team. So it was a great experience. It was funny though when they first brought me in. I went in. It was day of a game at Madison Square Garden. They brought me in the Ranger locker room. So it's like 4:30 in the afternoon. Not many guys. I don't think anybody was there yet. And all the jerseys are hanging up, and it's a beautiful sight. Like if you walk in that locker room, every piece of equipment is the same in every stall. You know, the jerseys are hanging there. And Phil Esposito came walking in, and you know, growing up in Canada, watching him in the '72 series against Russia and everything, he was a legend up in Canada, well, everywhere. And so I see him over there talking to the trainers, and I know he doesn't know who I am at all, and nor should he have, but. So they were telling who I was, and he comes walking over to me, and Phil Esposito's walking over to me in an NHL locker room, and I was ready. I was going to pass out. It's like, this is unbelievable. And he comes over. He says, "Tommy, I've heard a lot about you. I'm Phil Esposito." I'm like, "Okay, no, no kidding." He said, "I'm really looking forward to playing with you." And I'll never forget that the way he was with me. Again, he didn't know who I was, but still, he knew how much it meant to me or how much it would mean to me to go over. So it was those kinds of things were pretty
He
good.
also knew you were 6'2" and you were going to be behind his back when he was out front starting crap in Philadelphia, and you'd be the first guy into the pile. But
Yeah.
you know, Phil was great. I have a great Phil Esposito story.
Yeah.
Do you remember back in the day, you guys were able to drive to the Meadowlands?
Oh yeah.
The players would drive. So
Yep.
my friend group and I, we would kind of leave school a little early and
Oh yeah.
not tell our parents and go to the Meadowlands because we all lived in Jersey.
Uh,
And we'd wait in the parking lot and we'd get autographs. And that's how I became really good friends with Ron Greshner. Was his mom surprised him one day and showed up to a game. And I actually sat with Miss Greshner.
oh.
And after the game was over, she's like, "We're going to go outside and surprise Ron and telling him I'm here." And we went out and we surprised Ron. And Ron had that monster black Jeep, if you
Oh
remember, with the
yeah.
big giant tires. And we
Yeah.
couldn't get his mom in the Jeep. So here I am at like 15, 16 years old and Ron, and we're trying to lift Mrs. Greshner up into the Jeep. So that was one of the stories. And then the other was we had left school early one day and we were in the Meadowlands probably like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and we're playing ball hockey. And we see this limo pull up. And I don't know if you remember, Phil had a big Samoan guy who would drive him around. This guy was a
Yeah. Oh,
big,
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
intimidating man.
Yeah.
And we kind of got in the way of the limo and he rolled the window down and he goes, "What the F are you kids doing here? Why ain't you in school?" And we looked at him and we go, "Because we're here to meet you, Phil." And he goes, "What?" And we were like, "We're here to meet you, Mr. Esposito." And he's like, "Really?" He's like, "What do you guys do?" And we're like, "We got a couple hockey cards. We want to get Bubba to sign. We want George McPhee, blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "How do you get them?" And I was like, "Well, when they park." And he's like, "Nah, come with me." And we're like, "What?" And he goes, "Get in the car." And he pulled us down the ramp and
Oh
he went over to Joey Pacino and he
yeah.
said, "These guys are with me. Put them in the locker room and get all their cards signed. And when they're done, just put them in a seat somewhere."
Oh.
And it was like one of the highlights, being a young teenager, getting in, and there's the locker room, and we're watching before the game Marv Albert do the pregame interviews with guys, and we're watching the guys. Like, we never realized, like, there was one sweater designated on the side for pregame interviews, so when the guys came in, they just threw this
Yeah.
generic Ranger sweater on. And, back in the day, it said New York on the front, which I missed tremendously.
Yeah.
I really do miss and wish they went back to that jersey. But Phil was so good to the fans. And especially, he was a wild general manager. Oh my God, I don't know how the Rangers ever survived that era. But tell me, when you come into training camp the first time, what were some of the stories? Who warmed up to you? And did you get like the rookie treatment, or were you brought right into the NHL games? Did you play in the rookie games back then?
Well, great question, and I bring up Phil too. So again, not knowing really what the expectation was, like, especially with Freddie Shearer as the coach. Freddie didn't talk at all. So it was just they send you notification like what time you have to be there, everything. So you show up, and again, back in those days, the older players, and there was a strategy to it. They weren't being lazy. They didn't work out during the summer at all. They rested their bodies. Training camp was a longer camp, 2-day practices, so they got themselves in shape during training camp. Well, I feel I can't afford to really do that. I have to show up in shape because I want to make the team right off the bat. So I was running hills. I was up back in Marquette, Michigan, where I went to school during the summer, and I was great shape, and jacked up, lifting weights every day and everything. I was a physical player. And again, with Freddie Shearer as a coach, if you're a big guy, you better be a physical player to make the team. You got to stand out. So, like 2 or 3 days into training camp, we're having a practice, a scrimmage, I should say, at the Rye Playland up in Rye, New York, where our training camp was, and where we practiced. And Phil Esposito's carrying the puck through center ice. And again, he's not in shape at all. I'm in mid-season shape because I'm a rookie trying to make the team. And he loses the puck in his feet, puts his head down, and I just smoked him. I hit him with a shoulder right in the chest, knocked him on his ass, and that was what I was supposed to do. I'm trying, but it was Phil Esposito. It wasn't like some guy in the minors. And the building went dead quiet. He got up and he was livid. He was like, "You F this and F that," and and it's one of those moments where you're saying to yourself, "Okay, I could rationalize this. Okay, this is what I'm supposed to do." But this is Phil Esposito. He's pissed. Am I getting sent home or what's going on? Everything settles down. We finish practice, and we go in the locker room, and we're all in the same locker room together. And he comes walking over to me, and I'm thinking, am I going to get into a fight here in the locker room with Phil Esposito? And he comes over, and you can tell he's still pissed, and he goes, I go, what do you say? He says, "You want to make this team a lot, don't you?" I says, "Yes, Phil. I've dreamed all my life of playing in the NHL." And he says, "Okay, I respect that a lot. I see what you did and why you did it, but just don't do it again." And kind of tapped me on the shoulder. And it was amazing. It was one of those moments in life, like there's certain things that happen as you're coming into the NHL, and there's certain things you remember. And I'll never forget that. That was like that feeling like, oh God, what have I done? I think I've done the right thing. And then him to accept it that way. And for him to be and like you're talking, how good he was to you guys. That's the way he was genuinely as a person, to fans, to young players. My rookie year, he and his wife cooked dinner. They lived in the city. It was Thanksgiving dinner. And it was his last season. He was going to retire around Christmas. And he had Ron Duguay, Ron Greshner, and Barry Beck. They all live in the city near him. And then he invited Dave Silk and myself in for dinner. And it was one of the things, I tell this story. It was so long ago, it really doesn't matter. But so the wine's going pretty good. Phil's the Italian guy, and turkey you're tired after and everything. So then I can't remember. Somebody pulled out a big doobie, like the size of somebody's arm, and so well, of course, like Silk and I are thinking like, oh my God, like this, we're smoking pot with Phil Zito and these guys. So Phil, and again, I don't want to misrepresent here, but he laid down in front of the fireplace that they had going. Now his head wasn't in the fireplace, but it was close enough that, and again, he's had wine, he's turkey, he's smoking pot.
He's got hairspray in.
Yeah. And so Beck and Dugan and Greshner, they're laughing at him. And Silk and I are going, what if his head catches fire? So we grab him by the two, we each grabbed a foot and we dragged him like a foot away or 2 feet away from the fire. And I went home, and again, no cell phones, went home, called all my buddies back in college. I said, you won't believe it. I just pulled Phil Zito out of the fire. So it was those kind of moments. But it was, what it was, like everybody with like a lot of businesses and careers, if you show up and you show that you're going to do the work to be part of the team, like nobody's going to hand you something. I wasn't a high round. I was a 6th round draft pick. I wasn't a 1st round draft pick. Then they tend to accept you even more, and really go out of the way to help you. And that was the case with me. I'd had a good training camp. I needed to be a physical player. Did that, getting in some fights and everything. And they gave me, I'll never forget, you mentioned Joey Bucchino. So partway through training camp, at some point, they give you a jersey with a number on. So if you're a guy that's really just there for training camp, they give you like number 43 or 45 or whatever it is. So he hands me number 2 on my jersey. And that's what I wore in college. And he looks at me and he goes, you deserve this. And this is like 3 or 4 weeks into training camp, whatever. And that was like, I think that was kind of like I felt like I was playing well, but that was kind of like the first indication to me that, wow, this is going pretty well. Because I really didn't know if I was going to be in the NHL or not. And actually things went well after that. So it was interesting. I think they still kind of penciled me in. They weren't sure about me yet. And then we had a rookie game. So there's the rookie games where like if we played against the Islanders rookies, it's none of the big guys. It's all guys. I don't know if there's any limitations on it, but basically it was guys who were going to be in the minors or just coming into the NHL. And we played out Long Island someplace. And Hector Marini was on the Islanders, and he was kind of had a tough guy reputation. And we got into it, and I gave it to him pretty good in that scrap. And next night they were due to play the big club. The NHL, the Rangers big club against the Islanders big club out in Long Island. And I wasn't due to play in that game. And all of a sudden they came to me the next morning and said, you're playing tonight. And so obviously it was because of the fight. And went out and played. And that was like, again, I really thought coming up, I was going to beat the crap out of everybody in the NHL, and then you get there and like with the Islanders, it's Gillies and Nystrom and Gord Lane. And then you go to Philly, it's Holmgren and Wilson and everybody in Philly. And so to go there and then that really, I don't think I played any more rookie games after that. It was all NHL games. I think I got about 11 preseason games in with the big club and ultimately made the team.
That was the Marini fight, your first fight in a Ranger uniform?
Yeah, first pro fight, yeah. And I had, again, in college, you're not supposed to fight much. I played junior B hockey, so I fought there. So I'd been in plenty of fights before, but still it was pro hockey. I'll never forget too, because again, seriously, I really thought like I was the toughest guy on the planet coming to the NHL. I really did. They had up in Marquette, Michigan, Muhammad Ali came up for a exhibition fight, and they had me working security. And so I'm kind of holding the crowd back as Muhammad Ali's walking through the crowd. Again, it was just an exhibition match. And he walks by me. And I swear to God, I'm thinking, I'm going to sucker him. I'm taking him. I really think so. I really thought I was that tough. When you get to the NHL, you start realizing, oh, man, there's tough dudes here, So
and back in the day, in those training camps, it was like you played the Islanders, the Flyers. You played your division, and usually back to back. So it was like Washington, Philadelphia Islanders, Washington, Philadelphia Islanders, right in a row. Now, as a kid, it was great for us because again, I grew up loving the physical aspect of hockey. A little known fact: I have a mentor, Sandy Vigilante, who's the godfather of the hockey fight trading community.
Oh,
He was my mentor. I just broke out. Probably, I've been counting. I'm up to like 6,000 hours on DVD
oh,
of everything from the AHL, IHL, junior from 73 to last season on DVD.
oh,
Um, and those training camp fights or the preseason are the most sought after tapes in the history of the game, because you didn't get to see it. But what was it like the first time you went into the Spectrum? Like, where I want to go with this question is, if you could rank the division in terms of intimidation by arena, where would the Spectrum fall in?
yeah. That's a great question. So the Spectrum's at the top. I mean, Boston would probably be, no, not in our division, but as far as the whole NHL, Boston would probably be second. Uh, but as a kid, growing up, you're watching so many games, you're seeing all the brawls, and you walk in there, and the Spectrum is dark, lower glass, the fans are all over you, and they hate the Rangers too.
Right.
Uh, so it was pretty intense. But you go out there first. I had a couple of fights already, and you could just tell that the other tough guys on other teams, obviously they're asking, or people are coming to him and say, "Listen, watch. I know you don't know Laidlaw, but he's pretty tough." So that either means, okay, I'll stay away from him, or I'm going to go fight him.
Right.
So going into the Spectrum, I remember playing well. We didn't. We had some brawls. We must have had brawls because I actually remember Phil Esposito at some point when he retired from playing, he got into management. He says, "What are we doing playing these games? Why are we playing against Philly and the Rangers? Because they might as well not have brought a puck out. Because as you mentioned before, it didn't.
Right.
The wins and losses didn't matter. A lot of it was just young kids proving they were tough enough to play in the NHL, setting the tone for the future games, getting somebody back from last year if they did something to you. So yeah, it was just brawls, and it didn't. And again, you would do nothing out there and it just become a brawl. But I never. It just seemed like, okay, we're going, and it was. We joked around though. You go into Philly and they turn the bus off, and everybody's still shaking even though they turned the bus off. But you know what though? We at that time we had a big, tough physical team. It was
Yeah.
Barry Beck, Katsopoulos, Hospodar, myself. I don't think Nicky was there yet. I think he'd gotten traded away and then came back later. But we had a really physical team. So
Andre Dory for a little while was with you guys. Andre can throw him too.
absolutely good pump on you. Rod Dugay was a tough guy.
Yeah, Ron never got the credit he deserved. Ron never backed down from anybody. I mean,
Yep,
he had that long flowing hair and everybody took shots at him. But I saw Hoytas and the
yep,
Ben Wilsons, and he never backed down from anyone.
totally. Eddie Johnstone was another guy that wasn't as big but was tough as nails.
Eddie's a good friend. We just did an interview with Eddie. Yeah.
Great guy. We love him. He was one of my all-time favorite teammates. We did a podcast with him. He was singing. He was a good guy. So what happens when you have a physical team? Other teams are less likely to try to send a message. So again, we had our brawls, but that again, it probably wasn't until my fourth or fifth year in the league that we got away from playing those guys all the time in the preseason. But it was it was entertaining. Yeah, it was funny.
You got
It was
you got
funny.
any good Ben Wilson stories? Next week I'm interviewing Ben. I'm just wondering. I always ask guys, like, when you go to you mentioned Gillies, obviously you mentioned Nystrom always being on you. With the Flyers, you said Holmgren, you said Wilson, but it never ended with them. You had the Hoytas, you had the Holtz, you had. It seemed like every single year they brought in the other tough guy from the league who was the toughest guy. They somehow or another managed to be a Flyer for a season.
Yeah, they had Glenn Cochran, then they brought in Dave Brown. Oh, yeah. But it's funny. I'll mention a quick Dave Brown story, but we'll get to Wilson. So Brown, he had his reputation coming up, and when he came in, you could tell he went right for Barry Beck. It was a preseason
Three
game.
times.
Yeah, remember that game? And
Oh, I was there.
yeah, and Barry held him down. And Barry's lecturing. I'm thinking, listen, smarten up, your little pumpkin. And
Terry Kleisinger.
yes, that's right, Terry. Carpenter. And we had Terry Karkner too. Remember Terry?
Yep,
Karkner?
Terry Karkner and Kleisinger, the goalie, fighting, and you had and at that time Tony Feltrin, the poor guy, took a beating because the Sutters were holding his arms while somebody else was drilling him in the corner.
Yeah, and he's another tough guy too. Yeah. So Dave Brown, we had a preseason game with the Flyers, and they had this fair. Something the wives put on something at the Spectrum,
The Flyers
And
Carnival, the
yeah,
Wives Carnival.
so we played a preseason game like at 10 in the morning or something like that. So I don't know why, but I get tied up with Dave Brown, and I started the fight. And I was a veteran player, but I had no reason to fight him. It's a preseason game, and so we go at it, and then I try to sucker him at the end of the fight the whole bit. We get to the penalty box. Back then in the old Spectrum, the penalty box was like now it's all separated by glass. Now, but then I mean, you're distance away from each other, but sitting between you is like 4 or 5 guys running the clock, and and you get to know those guys who play there all the time. And they say, "Hey, Tommy, how you doing?" So we go to the penalty box after fighting Brown, and he leans over and goes, "Tommy, what are you doing? I took it easy on you, and you're trying to sucker me." And the guys sitting in between are dying laughing because it's like this. We just got into a fight, but we're having this nice conversation. And I go, "Brownie, I don't know what the frig I was doing." And so years later, when I got traded to LA, lined up with Brownie in the Spectrum. And back then, if you lined up a Brownie as a Ranger, something was going to happen. He was out there for a purpose. But I'm with the Kings now, and it was a regular season game. And line up next to him, and he looks at me and goes, "Hey, Tommy, how you doing? How you like LA?" And everything. I'm thinking to myself, "Who the hell is this guy?" Like,
You know what's funny too? Dave Brown, for such an intimidating guy, has such a soft, almost cartoon character voice.
Totally. Yep, great guy. Yeah, I met him when I was in the agent business. He was a scout, and we joked around about it after. So yeah, fantastic. And that's most of those tough guys are like that too. But Ben Wilson was. I don't know Ben Wilson. I've never met him. But of all the guys that and I did a lot of podcasts with guys, and whenever you talked about even other tough guys, like we're talking now, Nystrom, Gillies, Holmgren, Dave Semenko, they were all really loved by their teammates, and then even after the game by guys they played against because they were such good guys, great in the community. Ben Wilson had this rep, and it's unfair because, like I said, I'll be honest, I've never met him, never spoken to him, but all the stories I heard about him was there's he had a screw loose. There's something wrong with him. I talked to guys who had roomed with him in training camp and everything from the Flyers, and they had to go to management and say, "Listen, I can't room with him." So it wasn't just on the ice; it was off the ice as well. I don't know if that was by design by him, if he had something wrong. I heard he was very. I think Jim Gordon may have said it during a game that he was a very intelligent guy supposedly. But he would do things that were just totally unnecessary. Like a guy like a Glenn Cochran or Holmgren or whatever, they would fight for a purpose. To get their team going. Wilson would just do stupid stuff. We were playing in a regular or a playoff game, and Eddie Neal was in net. You may have saw this video, and we beat the Flyers like 9-2 or something like that because they took all these bad penalties. And he skated by Eddie Neal. There's nothing going on. The game.
Oh, he chopped him.
Yeah, he chopped him in the head.
Yeah, I remember.
It wasn't even that hard, but it was just stupid. The referee's standing right there, and everybody's like, "What?" I mean, there was no purpose to it. So he would do stuff like that. So it was kind of, again, like when you're playing against a Bobby Clark or Brian Trotz or whatever, they would play hard, maybe nasty, but they would play to win. They wouldn't do things to hurt the team. Where Ben was kind of, and again, there's sometimes like Eddie Hospital is a good friend of mine. We played together, and I had him on a podcast, and you can tell I asked him, and he was kind of careful the way he asked him, but basically he knew what he was doing. He was building a reputation by doing all these crazy things. With Wilson, I just don't know if that was the case or not. And you know what, though? He was a great player, too. That's what got kind of.
Well, what's amazing? He's a first-round pick, and if you look at his first year in the league, he put up, 50-something points? Yep. He scored 16 goals in the season. He was a talented guy, but he just, like you said, he went off the deep end a lot. It was kind of, here's a guy, too, when the first fight he had with Gillies, that was the first time I ever seen Gillies get destroyed. Yeah. And Clark talked about it. You ever seen the segment with him and Nystrom where he said that Bobby had to sit him down and say, "Hey, look, there's a monkey on your back for a long time, and we're going to get it off your back." And Clark's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "We're playing Chicago tomorrow, and you're going to F up. You're going to fuck up Ben Wilson. Yeah. You have to revenge that fight, And,
that was a great video because I didn't, that interaction between him and Nystrom was pretty interesting, that they would, I hadn't heard that before. Yeah. And yeah, for somebody to get the upper hand on Clark Gillies was something. And yeah, you're right. Geez, Wilson would play the power play, penalty killing.
Yeah.
God, he was such a good. That was the thing when you watch the old videos. Like, wow, what a great player! But what are you doing? Like, why all the stupid stuff? So, and again, I don't think that was I don't think they pushed him in Philly to do it. I think that's who he was because when he got to Chicago, he was still doing the same stuff. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I interviewed a bunch of guys, Chris Nyland, Brian Curran, and I asked this question, and a lot of guys don't answer it, but a lot of guys do, and it's a real passionate answer. Is there a player you played against that you personally did not like for one reason or another? Like Brian Kern hated Chris Nyland. Like the 10 minutes of the interview was about how he could not stand Chris Nyland and how dirty Nyland was, and Nyland was a sideshow. And Nyland talks about how much he hates Rick Vive, and so there's a lot of different answers. I'm just wondering, like, maybe not a hatred, but was there a guy that you just couldn't stand on the ice?
It would be Ben Wilson. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It was he just because again because who I was, especially with Herb would always play me against Bob Nystrom. I always played against Paul Holmgren, and it was kind of like you came to the understanding that we both knew, like in Holmgren's case, we didn't have to talk about it. We knew that we're going to play again. We could play, our series happens. I'm going to be out there with Holmgren, and if it wasn't home or away, both coaches wanted the same thing. They wanted each of us out there against each other, but it was like, okay, don't be dirty, don't do whatever. And if you want to hit me now, if I was like in Nystrom's case, if I was running around hitting other people like Bobby Nystrom or Mike Bossy or somebody, then he was going to come and get me, and he did. So but I knew that. I knew, again, and I kind of forgot, which is a really important part of the story. After he got me, he realized I'd spent the night in the hospital. He called me the night before the next game. Now, he wasn't afraid of me. He wasn't afraid of anybody. But he was really genuinely, he says, Tom, listen, I know, I can't remember his words, but it's basically this: we play against each other all the time. You've never hit me dirty. I really didn't mean to hurt you in that play. And then when we ultimately lost, as usual, to them in the playoffs, and we had the handshake at the end, he pulled me out of the handshake line after that too, and he apologized again. So it was
a pretty classy move.
Yeah, and then we had to continue playing against each other. We continued to, beat the crap out of each other, him more than me. But it was
that team set you guys back. I honestly think at least 3 cups.
Oh,
it was either whoever won those series was winning the cup. I don't know what happened in Montreal. I was 9 years old. I just remember my personal hatred in the NHL is Ken Dryden, and I had no problem telling him because my favorite player of all time is Walter Tkachuk.
Oh, okay.
And when the Rangers lost the Stanley Cup Finals, Walt was sitting crying, and I saw my idol cry. It broke my heart at 9. I met Ken Dryden. He went to shake my hand, and I said, nope. And he said, excuse me? And I said, you made my idol cry. And he's like, what? And I said, you made Walter Tkachuk cry in 1979. I have no use for you. And I walked away from him. And my friends were like, you're crazy. You're not going to get his autograph. I'm like, nope, I have no use for him.
That's loyalty there. That's loyalty there.
Oh, you want to talk about loyal? I'll tell you a story. Ask Ron. Rangers are playing the Devils in an exhibition game. You were with LA. You had just left. It was 86 or 87 because I was 16 or 17 years old. And I'm row 1 behind the bench, and a brawl breaks out. And 2 Devils, Dave Maley and someone else, are holding Ron. And Ron's back's over the glass. And Bob Hoffmeyer, who wasn't dressed, suckered Ron in street clothes.
Oh.
And I beat the shit out of Bob Hoffmeyer in the Brendan Byrne Arena for hitting Ron.
Did you really?
Oh yeah, we squared off. I hit him with 2 shots. I knocked his glasses off, and he started running up the stairs to get away from me. And I'm chasing him up the stairs, and security tackled me. And it was just fun. Ron looked over, and he didn't know it was me. And after the game, I was outside waiting for my stupid hockey card to get signed. And he was like, "Was that you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Thanks." They were holding him down, and Bob was suckering him over the glass. And and I'm also in the book, 101 Things You Need to Know as a Ranger fan. Right. I'm the guy who ripped Billy Smith's toupee off and ran out of Nassau Coliseum with it.
Did you really?
So,
yeah. I have argued with people over and over. They did not believe me that he had a toupee.
I ripped it off. I walked up in the Marriott across the street in the parking lot. Yeah. He was walking out, and the elevator door opened, and I said, "Billy, I'm with Sears." And he goes, "Excuse me?" I said, "I'm with Sears. We need to clean your rug." And I ripped it off and ran out the back door. It's right in the Marriott with him and security chasing me. And I ended up throwing it onto the parking lot and taking off because they were going to kill me.
Oh,
but yeah, it was a little too fanatical back in the day. But it was the fan. And that brings me to my question I wanted to bring up. Yeah. The old Garden. You come in 79. You're with, you sign your contract, 80, you come in and play, you put up 100 penalty minutes, 29 points, you're playing for Freddie DeFog. Toughest, like you said, tough teams. Yeah. Old Garden compared to the new Garden, there's no comparison. When you talk about the old blue seats, you talk about the old Spectrum, the buildings in the 80s, 70s and 80s were just so much of a hockey environment, and I think that's lost now.
Oh yeah, it's so much more corporate now, and the money. I mean, obviously they charge so much for tickets, hot dogs, parking, all that. Player salaries. So it's all about generating revenue. Yeah, the old Garden was obviously the people. There's lots of money down low in the lower bowl, and then you go back up to the blue seats, as you know probably better than I do. I mean, that's the steel workers,
Right.
blue collar guys and everything. So yeah, I mean, we would play the Islanders, and there'd be more brawls up in the stands than there were on the ice.
Well, you weren't allowed to come to the Garden in an opposing team's jersey. That was an unwritten rule. Don't
Oh
show
yeah.
up. You
Oh
know.
God. I remember we were playing somebody and they started throwing batteries. It was Vancouver or something for some strange reason. Something happened and all of a sudden batteries coming down. They're trying to hit some guy with batteries. So yeah, it was. I mean, the level of intensity, like the hate. You don't see the hate for the Islanders or the hate for the Flyers or the hate for the Devils anymore. It's more. It's just another
But you
regular.
also don't see it with the players, Tom.
Yeah.
When you're watching a pregame skate and you're watching guys out on the red line in the '80s, it's you're defending that red line and you step over it. There's going to be a brawl, or you're setting the tone for. John Morasti tells it the best. He used to go to the red line and just sit there and intimidate. Would take his shirt off and he'd be flexing. Now they're talking about, hey, where's a good club after the game? Hey,
Oh,
did
I
you
know.
try my wine that I put out?
I know.
You know,
Yeah, well, yeah. When I mentioned that, you're right. It wasn't as much the players. The players hated each other. It was more the fans. They hated when the Islanders came in. It didn't matter. It could be a December game. Didn't matter what we were in the standings, whatever. The Islanders came in, and the feeling in the building was unbelievable. So there's no question. Listen, to clarify, the players, and I'm sure you say the same. They're great athletes today, but the whole environment. Yeah, you see the stuff that goes on before games where they're playing paper, scissors, rocks to see who goes off to the ice first or last, whatever. That kind of stuff. Like the old guys like me were just kind of going, oh God, like you're supposed to, like even like especially when you played with guys and then you get traded away, they get traded away. They weren't friends. Like they were friends years after the game, but
right?
you don't go to dinner with them before the game. You don't talk to them before the game. You talk to them after the game. You can be great buddies. I remember when I got out in L.A., young Jimmy Carson was with the Kings when I first got there, and then he got traded away in the Wayne Gretzky trade, and then we had a big series Wayne's first year. With the Kings, 7-game series, and it was nasty, And Jimmy Carson was a big goal scorer, and we were down 3-1 in the series, so we're doing everything we can to get back in. And I ran him, and I basically did to him what Nystrom did to me, and knocked him out. And but he was a buddy of mine. We played together, and that's we wanted to win.
You guys didn't see friendship; you saw sweaters. That's the difference.
Yeah, yeah, and it didn't. There was no hesitation. Didn't matter how good of friends you were with someone, and they would do the same thing to me. Didn't matter if you were great friends or not. You wanted to win, and it was really. It was also like, listen, those guys that you're in the locker room with now, like you have a responsibility to them. You can't be friends with somebody else because they. And I would do the same thing. If somebody was. And I remember it's kind of unfair. So there was Patrick. We had Peter Sundstrom on our team, right?
Yes.
Right. And his brother Patrick was playing in Vancouver, I think it was.
Yes.
And we went in to play in Vancouver, and they were on the ice against each other, and they were kind of like being buddies kind of thing on the ice during the play. And he came back to the bench, and I'll never forget. I don't know what was said exactly, but it was kind of like, hey, smarten up. That you're playing against you're with us now. Kind of, I don't care about your brotherhood or like. And he got the message, and it wasn't. We weren't really trying to be mean to him. Like it was more of an education. Like this is the National Hockey League.
Right.
We don't care who you're friends with, who your brother is. We're out here to win. But and again, that has gone away a little bit.
Well, I mean, look at the day with the Sutters. You're talking about the Hunters, the Sutters. I mean, these guys fought each other. The Primos fought each other. The Kachuks, if their mother wouldn't kill them, I think they'd fight every single game against each other.
How about Bob Probert and Joey Coaster getting into it one game there?
Yeah, they fought 4 times before it was over, and you're talking about it's a different world. But you're now done. Let's jump forward a little bit. You're done with Freddie. Freddie's gone. Yep. And Herb Brooks takes over the New York Rangers.
Now we went. Freddie got fired partway through the year, so we then had Craig Patrick for half the year, and then Herb came in the next year. Yep.
So you have the Olympic duo of Patrick and Brooks running it now. You have an influx of guys like Robbie McClanahan, Davey Silk, Dave Silk, man, underestimated tough kid, man. He goes into Philadelphia and fights McLeish like at a drop of a hat in that line brawl. Yeah. What was it like all of a sudden having that USA pride invade the locker room kind of?
Well, it was, that's a great question. So, as you mentioned, so my first year when Freddie got fired, Craig took over, we went that long run in the playoffs. We beat LA, beat St. Louis, ultimately lost to the Islanders in the semifinals. And we had a big, like I said, big, tough physical team. We beat the crap out of LA in LA, that big.
Mario Lassard getting smacked in the face by Hospital. Yep.
Right. And so that's who we were. We were that grinded out team. Steve Baker was. I didn't. I kind of forgot how great of a goaltender he was at that time. Good goaltending, grinded out, enough goal scoring. At Hedberg and Nielsen, Eddie Johnson, Don Maloney, those guys. But it was, we were going to grind you out. It was a test of will every time you played against the Rangers at that point. And so now Herb comes in, and again, for me, both as a team and personally, for me, like you mentioned before, I had 6 goals, 23 assists. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to be that good two-way defenseman. Now, I'm not going to be Ron Gresher. I'm not that kind of stick handler, whatever, but I'm going to score maybe 10, 15 goals, 30, 40 assists, whatever. And Herb comes in, and he had very specific designs of what he wanted each player to do. Even before the season started, he'd done his homework, he watched tape. So he wasn't coming in saying, okay, I want to get to know these guys. We had, I've told a story many times, but we had, at the end of training camp, we had practice at Rye Playland. The next day we were playing our first regular season game. Herb pulls the whole team together at center ice at Playland, and he's going through the whole team. Barry Beck, you're the captain of the team. Ron Greschner, you run the power play. Ron Duguay, you're doing this. And he gets to me at the end, and he goes, Laidlaw, when you get the puck, give it to somebody else. You're not supposed to have it. Now, I was devastated. I was like, you jerk. And the guys are dying laughing. I didn't understand Herb's way at that point. Like, I guess he felt like, well, I found out later on, he felt like I was tough enough mentally. Like I was going to be that assistant captain kind of guy. He was going to shit on me, but I was going to fight through it. I wouldn't pay attention to it and fight through it. And that's what he wanted. And then our team really changed too, where he got rid of the, Eddie Hospodars, the Chris Katsopoulos, more like you said, Rob McClanahan comes in, Mark Pavlich, and
Ray over to Lennon.
Yep. Yeah. Right. And the key thing with those guys, and I know you know this, is although they were not Katsopoulos and Hospodar, but they didn't back down either. They weren't going to fight, but Robbie McClanahan, guys are spearing him and everything, and Pav would take on it. Pav wouldn't back down to anybody. So
I saw Pavlich in that brawl we were talking about earlier. He fought Joe Patterson.
Yeah. And he went after. I remember when Jeff Chikrin cross-checked him, and then and he came back after him. It was pretty cool.
I love Mark Pavlich. It's a shame. We'll talk more about that later, but that's a shame. That guy was all balls to the wall on that ice, man. He was a fan favorite.
Totally. And he didn't care about, he could care less what somebody else thought about him or his game. He was going to do what he thought was right, and tons of respect for him. But again, the makeup and the style of play changed, but the competitiveness was still there. In fact, if you go back to 1984, we lost to the Islanders in the first round when Kenny Morrow scored in overtime. I believe that was the best team I ever played on with the Rangers, although we lost in the first round. And we did a podcast with Clark Gillies, which was funny. But he said, he talked about that, and he said, they thought, and they actually talked about it, that if we had won that series, they thought we would have won the cup that year.
That was the Donnie Maloney tied it up with the controversial high stick over the shoulder, but it wasn't, and then the shot from the point goes through Hanlon's feet.
Oh, God.
It was just devastating.
And we should have actually won the game before in the Garden and won that game. That would have ended the series. I remember Sutter scored a big goal late in the game or whatever, and ultimately won it. So that was... Yeah, and looking back at that game 5, it was like a 5-game series, right? Yeah, it's best of 5. I think.
Yeah, best of 5.
Yeah, and that game that we played there, that game 5 in the Island, I look back. That was again. I think that was the best game I ever played in my life, and at any level. That was, the players involved, the Rangers, Islanders, overtime goal, Kenny Morrow scoring. Obviously, we would have wanted to win, but man, we had a good team then too. So it was. So when Herb comes in, he really changes everything, and. Sometimes when that happens, when you go on a long run, sometimes when you go on a long run like that, usually they don't change anything, right? That's a success. We were, only 4 teams left playing in the National Hockey League at that time. We're in the semifinals. But Herb comes in, and that's not what he wanted. He knew exactly what he wanted. But when Herbie spoke, to his credit, there was no hesitation in his mind. He was totally confident, very detailed. He wasn't just wishy-washy saying, well, I hope this works or whatever. This is what we're going to do. He had the practice schedule down. He had this guy, Jack Blatherwick, was a great guy. He was the conditioning guru. So the conditioning days weren't based on him being mad at us and bag skating, whatever. It was there was a purpose to everything Herb did. And but the way he spoke so confidently and in such command, I remember walking out of the room thinking, okay, I guess that's it. There's really there's no leeway here. This is what Herb's doing, and that's it. And let's move forward.
That's the era of the Tom Laidlaw Fu Manchu. And let me tell you something. As a kid watching that you looked sick. Like you were intimidating Tom. Got to ask, what did Picard do to you in Toronto that you laid that beating on him?
Oh, that's a funny story. So I again, like we talked, that was my rookie year. I had a great training camp. Obviously, I'm still with the team, but back then they hadn't told me to get a place to stay yet, and they didn't go. You know, there wasn't some big ceremony. They would basically say, "Okay, Tom, you can get a place to stay," and that was the indicator that you had really made the team. They had not said that to me yet. We played my first regular season game was up in Boston the night before, and you know, you go up into Boston, and, you know, I'm thinking to myself, I'm still here, but nobody's telling me I've made the team, so like I'm just on edge all the time. And you know, and they had Stan Jonathan, Terry O'Reilly, Wayne Cashman, all these guys. So you're in there, and you're just like, they're just in awe that you're playing in the National Hockey League regular season game. And you got all these physical players, and I was so nervous. Started the game, first period. I went to shoot. I was playing left defense. Went to shoot the puck around the back of the net. I don't know how I did it. I ended up hitting John Davidson on the back of the leg into our net, scored on my own net. I'll never forget John Davidson, who was this larger than life figure, right? Because he was you watch him at 79 against the Islanders, a star player. So he's one of the guys you look to that you really want to get accepted by. You want JD to really believe in you. I'll never forget him looking at me through the mask, like, and you could tell the look in his eyes was like, "You idiot! Like, what are you doing?" And then you go back to the bench, and like you can't. That's not a coaching moment. The coach can't say to you, Tom, like, you know, let's get the chalkboard out and discuss this. Like, Tom, don't shoot the puck in your own net, you idiot. Um, so survive that game. So now going into Toronto, I'm thinking, I mean, man, my career's on the line here. And Freddie had pulled myself, Chris Katsopoulos, and Andy Hospodar in like a week before, like near the end of training camp. And I believe I'm probably paraphrasing a little bit, but he said, listen, you're all 6'2", you weigh 215 pounds. Now, I'm not telling you to fight. He says, but you're not going to play the first 5 minutes of each game, and you're not going to play the last 5 minutes of each game. What do you think you can do to help this team? But I'm not telling you to fight. So now we go into Toronto, and I'm carrying the puck through the neutral zone, and Picard, he butt ends me, but not like a butt end like he's trying to hurt me. It was basically like a hook, but he used the butt end of the stick, which is still kind of a dirty play in a lot of people's eyes. So he hooked me. I fell down. It was right, close to our bench. I could hear the bench jump up, and they're all yelling, "That's, you know, screaming or whatever, F you, Picard." Now, so I'm on the ice for like half a second, but I'm seriously, like it was flashing through my mind all my life dreaming of being in the NHL, shooting the puck in my own net in game one. Picard now butt ending me, and I'm saying, I can't let this happen. It doesn't matter. I can't analyze it whether I should do this or should not. I've got to get up and do something about this. So I just got up and just suckered him and knocked him down. And it was funny because I grew up watching Daryl Sittler. So now Sittler comes skating over towards me. He's the captain of the team, and you know, Picard's down. I'd suckered him when he was down again, and now Sittler's coming over skating to me, and he's got the f bombs going. F you, Laidlaw, I'm going to get you, and everything. And seriously, I'm looking at Sittler coming over, and I'm thinking, I want to get his autograph. Like I was still in awe, right, that I was on with Sittler. You know, I snapped out of it, and then we, you know, standing there at center ice having an FU fight with Sittler, and I'm thinking, after that was part of the biggest part for me. I was like, I couldn't believe I was having this FU fight with Sittler, and he was coming after me. So right after the game, they had told me to get a place. So it was really, you know, I actually kind of felt bad about it for a while because I didn't give him an opportunity at all. But I think part of it was like I had showed him during training camp, showed management how bad I wanted to make the team. I had to show them again in that situation. I recognized that, listen, I can't let this happen to me or my teammates. So I knocked him out. My mother and father were at the game. They grew up right outside of Toronto. My poor mother looked at me like, oh my God, what have I done? Like she actually said something too, because, you know, the mother brings you to practice and then,
Right.
so it was pretty funny. But it was, yeah, that was, I mean, obviously the good training camp really helped me, but that was the final nail that kind of, you know.
You answered Freddie's bell. What are you going to do? I'm not going to be intimidated, you know?
Yeah, you know what? And that kind of became, and again, I learned this from reading the book. That kind of became, I didn't realize it at the time, but it kind of became who I was as a player. And my father and grandfather were the same way. You know, they grew up on the farm where we had to milk the cows every day, twice a day. There was no options. It didn't matter if you're sick or tired or what it was. Those cows needed to get milk. And so that's what I grew up with. And I came to become that guy that if a coach told me to go do something, you know, that was the job he wanted me to do. And I'll never forget, we were playing a game. I got traded to LA, and we are playing a game out in Calgary. And I bought my father one of those. At the time, they didn't have the small satellite dishes. They had those big satellite dishes.
Yeah, the C-band.
Yeah, so I bought him one of those so he could watch all our games out in LA. we're playing Calgary. Scotty Bowman was not coaching at the time, so he was doing the color commentating for Hockey Night Canada. And I carried the puck up the ice. Mike Vernon was in net, I think it was. And I cut to the net, tripped over Vernon, and I go flying into the boards. I was going as fast as I could, which wasn't too fast, but I flew in the boards. And the play-by-play guy goes, he says, I don't know who that is, but he's not getting up from that. And my dad's watching this, and Scotty Bowman, this legendary coach goes, no, that's Laidlaw. He'll get up. He always gets up. Now, my father, he could not wait to tell me. That was he didn't care about me scoring goals.
Right.
The fact that I had built that reputation that I was always going to get up was what it was. And that's kind of what it became with Herb, was like that. Herb would, he would, so remember I mentioned before about Herb saying that Laidlaw, when you get the puck, give it to somebody else, you're not supposed to have it. So clearly he wanted me to be the defensive defenseman. But Herb was smart in that it was a two-way street. He knew that if I was going to become that player that he wanted, then he had to kind of reward me. So every time there was a defensive play, 30 seconds to go, down or up a goal, killing a penalty, I was the one. I was going to be on the ice, and he would literally come down, and good psychology by him, where he would never ask me, Tom, are you okay? Are you tired? Are you hurt or whatever? I could be bleeding, whatever. He'd literally come down and kick me in the ass, and he would say, he'd look, he says, get the fuck out there. And I didn't know why I would get so jacked up, but he was saying, I don't care if you're sick, if you're tired, if you're hurt, I want you on the ice. And that was what I wanted. He knew.
That's a great compliment coming from him,
Yeah, he knew me better than I probably knew myself at that point, but it was pretty cool. So that, building that reputation, and again, it started long before that, but as far as the pros go, knocking out Picard, kind of sent that message.
It sent it out. Well, we're going to go to a couple quick questions here. Favorite teammate of all time?
Oh man, I've been asked this before. That's a tough one because I was very fortunate. Here in New York, like we talked about a lot of these guys, like the Eddie Johnstones, the Ron Duguays, the Don Maloney, Dave Maloney, Gresh, James Patrick was another one. Guys like Steve Richmond, who didn't play a whole lot, but was just a great team player. And I'm going to miss him. Mike Allison was another one, fantastic. Glennie Hanlon was great. I was so fortunate to play with a lot of great guys. And I think part of it was too that, like for me, I wasn't talented enough that I was just going to make it on my talent. Like I had to be a good team guy. So those good team players, I became part of that pack with them. When I got to LA, guys like Dave Taylor, Phil Sykes, Luke Robitaille was a great team player. I was fortunate to play with Larry Robinson at the end of his career out there. Tim Waters and I got to be, we were partners together, and they called us Tim and Tom, and we were good buddies off the ice too. He was funny because we were playing on a team with Wayne Gretzky and all these star players, and Robbie Ftorek was coaching at the time. Him and Brian Maxwell was coaching the defenseman, and I played with Robbie here in New York, so we were kind of buddies. But they loved Tim and Tom. So there was games where we would play like 7 defensemen, and Tim and Tom would go out there every other shift. It was the funniest thing was when Wayne got traded there, and Wayne was an incredible teammate, very aware of how he treated his teammates and everything. So there was an offensive situation. He went out there with Robitaille, whatever it was, and they sent Tim and Tom out. So we looked up at Wayne's face, and he turns around and he sees Tim and Tom coming on the ice, and he rolls his eyes like, "Oh God." And he knew right away, he wasn't trying to insult us. We understood where he was coming from. We knew he wanted Steve Duchesne and, Doug Crossman or Larry Robinson on the ice. And he came to us after, and he went to apologize. We said, Wayne, don't worry. We understand totally. It doesn't bother us. So those kinds of things are funny. So to answer your question, I couldn't nail it down to one guy.
I'll give you the next question to make it a little bit easier.
Yep.
Tom Laidlaw is going out to golf. You got to force him. Who's in the cart with you?
Well, it's going to sound a little strange. Does it have to be hockey players?
No. Who's your guys?
Well, I grew up really. There's a guy that played for the Dallas Cowboys, Randy White.
Randy. Yeah, of course.
They called him the Manster, and he was number 54. And I just loved him, and I didn't know what it was, and now I realize he just would never quit. Like his reputation was obviously a big, physical, good player, but it seemed like every snap of the ball, he was just giving it everything he got, and I just always admired that with him. I'm really big in the military. I've really got to know a lot of guys doing a lot of charity stuff with Navy SEALs and Army and different Marines and everything. A guy I really admire is Pat Tillman, who played for
The
Cardinals.
Cardinals, Arizona Cardinals, yeah.
And then after, I think it was after 9/11, right? Then he joined the Army.
Yes.
Ultimately lost his life. He was a friendly fire accident. There's a big story behind it. But that kind of person. And there's another guy, this Michael Monsoor, who isn't as, he was a Navy SEAL. If you ever watched the movie Act of Valor, Act of Valor's got some real Navy SEALs in it, and they take about 5 different real life stories and combine them together in the story from the movie. And there was a part in the movie where one of the Navy SEALs, there was a grenade that was thrown, and to save all the rest of his teammates, he dove on the grenade, and that was a true story in real life. So he's really revered, as a lot of those guys are. So those would be the guys I would go golfing with.
That's pretty cool. That's a much different answer than anybody else has ever answered on it.
Yeah.
Favorite NHL sweater growing up as a kid? Which one did you want to own?
You know what? I grew up around Toronto, but I wouldn't say it's the Toronto Maple Leafs. I followed Bobby Orr because he was so different, but I was such a different player than him. I really didn't idolize him. It sounds kind of strange. The first jersey that I really remember, long before I was even drafted by the Rangers, was the Rangers. It was probably more like the Kitchener Rangers was a junior team back then, and they had the same jersey. So those are the days, like, when you're growing up and you're playing, as a kid, you're growing up and you're getting to junior B and all these different things. And now playing major junior hockey was, when I first started getting letters from teams when I was draft eligible, like for the Bantam draft, started getting these letters in the mail from the Peterborough Petes and the Kitchener Rangers, and they all got the logos on the envelopes. That was a big thing as a kid. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And Kitchener was, it was the jersey and the logo they had and everything. So it does sound strange, but it was the Kitchener Rangers.
Kitchener Rangers. Favorite place to eat after a game in New York? Favorite place to eat after a game in LA?
Well, when I was in LA, by that time I was married. My ex-wife now, but wife at the time, had a son from a previous marriage, so a stepson. So I was the old guy that went home after games. I wasn't out in the city. We lived in Palos Verdes, which was away from the city. So we'd have to get home, get the babysitter. So I'd go home. Yeah, it was. I'd had my fun in the city too, in New York. Well, in New York, it would have to be Orrin and Oretsky's. Was a place up on 3rd Avenue and 85th or something like that. It was a place called Orrin Oretsky's, a great little restaurant. Guys, Ken Oretsky and Steve Ornstein, I think, ran it. And that was the place we went to. That was so we would all, it wasn't mandatory, but it was really good. We had a good bunch of team guys. We would all go there, get a bite to eat, and then guys would go off in different locations. But it was cool. I'll never forget. I'm a single guy, and I've been in there 2 or 3 times, and I get in there, and it's after a game, and I'm talking to these 3 nice, hot blonde girls, thinking I'm Joe Cool, NHL player. And your buddy Gresh comes walking in, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to become friends with Gresh here, so I'm going to introduce him to my ladies here, So I said, Ron, I want you to meet these 3 girls. He looks at me. He was hilarious. Gresh. He looks at me with this look, and he goes, Tom, this is not my first time in here. So, he'd met every girl in Manhattan at that point, so me trying to introduce him to somebody. So, but
what's funny is that Doogie gets all the credit for pulling it, But I'll tell you what, Ron Greshner was the man.
Oh, totally, yeah. Well, and Dukes was more, and I'm not giving him a hard time with this. Dukes is more, he was just such a good looking guy. He didn't, I see Dukes on TV now. He never talked when we played with him. I don't think wasn't like he had some great lines or he's like the suave guy or whatever. Dukes was just an unbelievable, gorgeous guy that women just loved. Gresh is more like he was a good looking dude too, but it was more, he had the personality and everything. But we used to go, Chris Katsopoulos and I lived together our rookie year. And so I
hope you didn't have to pay that food bill.
Oh, no, he paid his own. But we would go out to the city and we would tell all these girls, he said, listen, we're having a party back. It was up in Westchester. And it said, Dave Maloney made the mistake of renting his apartment to us. So we would say to all the girls, yeah, we're having a party back at our place. Ron Duguay's going to show up. So we'd get back to our place and be like 20 girls. And Dugay wasn't showing up. So, but so we come to practice the next day and say, hey, Dukes, thanks a lot. That was a good party we had last night. Thank you.
Kotzi's a good friend of mine too. I call him the Iron Greek because he's he's got a love for wrestling. Kotzi loves everything. He loves music. He loves horror movies. He loves everything. Him and his wife are just absolutely amazing people. They welcome me into their lives, and I still talk to Kotzi. He checks on me all the time down here since I moved out of New Jersey. Yeah. That was, like you said, that was a big turnaround for the Rangers at the time. That was kind of like they went from the Intimidator to the Smurfs, kind of in a season and a half.
Yep.
That Herbie took it to the Pavlich, McClanahan, Miko Lennon style, away from, like you said, the Andre Dory, Chris Christopoulos.
Yep.
Did you feel less obligated to drop the gloves? Because it seemed like towards the end of your Ranger stint, you became that stay-at-home rock, where you kind of realized it was more important to spend them 5 minutes on the ice than it was to try to keep continuing that reputation of being an NHL tough guy.
Yeah, you've done your homework. You are a Rage fan. It was a few things. Herb actually came to me, said just what you said basically. He said, Tom, if you're going to be the guy that we're counting on all the time, you can't be sitting in the penalty box. And I also, especially when you're young, like there's some guys like I represented Darren Langdon, and you remember him. And
Love Darren.
when Darren fought, like when I fought, I would get mad, and it'd be that 30, 40-second burst of adrenaline and just throw as many punches as you can. Darren wasn't like that. It was strategic. Like they always talked about how he was a second half fighter. So he would let guys kind of get a few punches in. He'd hold on really smart. Then all of a sudden he'd turn it on. I wasn't like that. I would get, like, if I knew I was going to fight somebody, I'm wound up, right? And now for me to play the role I needed to play, I wasn't concentrating on the game. I was concentrating on getting this fight. So it was, it became, and I think back in those days too, if you come in and you prove that you can fight and are willing to fight, now that kind of goes away. And now you just become a player. Now, if your teammate's in trouble, we had a game, we played in Washington. Scott Stevens was just getting going in his career. And Thomas Sandstrom was on our team. And Thomas was a shit disturber. Like back then, he didn't speak English when he first started. And he was a shit disturber even in practice. And we were like, this guy's a jerk. But you know what? After you get to know him, he was just this intense guy. And he came to practice to work. And you came to really respect him. Like he was probably the most misunderstood guy.
Most likely to get killed also, because every tough guy in the league wanted to kill him. Stevens, Brown, they all tried to kill him. Yeah.
So he did something to Stevens in Washington, and I was on the ice with him, and he squared up with Stevens, and I'm thinking, no, this can't happen. So I went and jumped in and grabbed Stevens, and ultimately got thrown out of the game for being the third man in. So for those kinds of things, and other guy, I don't want to paint the picture I was some hero. There's plenty of other guys who would have done the same thing, but it was just I became more that guy that okay, I've proven that I can do it. I'm going to be that good, solid defenseman. I was assistant captain. I was winning player awards, all this kinds of stuff. So I really fell into that role, like you said, of being that guy that they could always count on. And that was good and bad because I remember when my first 4 years in the league, I only missed 2 games. It was more, and Herb wanted to rest me at the end of my second year, at the end of my fourth year. I would have played every game. Then my 5th year, I ruptured my spleen, and that was when I first realized, man, like I said, I was really proud of the fact that I was always there. That's who I became. I wasn't going to be Ron Duguay walking out of Madison Square Garden. A lot of times I'd walk out of Madison Square Garden and I think I was Don Maloney or something. I get confused for somebody else. But I would, I was always there doing my job. And that was, there's a great article they wrote in one of the Ranger magazines. And they interviewed Al Arbour. And he recognized that. And it was pretty cool that Al Arbour would say something nice about it. So, yeah.
Al Arbour, what a legend he was, and what again, as a Ranger fan, you hated the sight of the guy, but
God.
the respect that it's weird. Like as a kid, you would never in your life say anything nice about the Islanders. Like I'm 54. Like I said, I grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s with that rivalry. Hated them, and yet now they're not hung up. They're folded and put in a trunk in the garage. But I do have signed Nystrom and Gillies jerseys. I have Dennis Potvin stuff. I have a Mike Bossy. You had the distinction of playing against and with some of the greatest goal scorers in the history of the game. Where would you rank Bossy as far as in the top? What number would you say is natural goal scorer? Because it's like him, LaFleur, now this generation, Ovechkin, Gretzky. But where do you rank Bossy? Because if that guy didn't get hurt, I think there's no question he's a 500-600 goal scorer.
And now I mentioned like Rick Middleton. Now Rick wasn't as good as Bossy maybe, but when I mention them, I say those two guys together because you watch them play, and you think they're not great skaters. They really weren't great stick handlers, and a lot of times the puck was bouncing all over the place. But when you're out there playing against them, you're thinking, okay, I'll take the puck away from Bossy. I'll take the puck away from Middleton. I'm this good defensive player. But for whatever reason, and it obviously was their skill level because it wasn't just once in a while. Obviously, it was all the time. The puck would just follow them around. They always found a way to get to the puck and just to shoot the puck. And again, you watch Bossy, you think, how is he doing it? but it was over and over. There's this one famous video of him scoring against Vancouver in the finals when he's kind of up in the air, feet are like he's parallel to the ice, and he's shooting the puck and he scores. And and again, other guys occasionally would do that, but that was just all the time with him. That we mentioned that game in '84, the game 5 where we lost and Kenny Morrow scored. I think it was 3-2. What is or something? They just
Yeah.
and I'm on the ice with Bossy, and I'm thinking we go by what I learned as this player is we have this saying we call take away the time and space, close the gap. So if I'm out there with Bossy, I don't want to give him any space at all. So I'm right up on him. I think it was I can't remember, it was Potvin or whoever, and Potvin was smart too. So he shot the puck right at both of us, knowing that was Mike Bossy and he could make something happen. But I was there, thought I did the smart thing. I put my body between the puck and Bossy. Puck's on my stick. I said, I'm not holding on to the puck. I'm going to steer it away. I'm just going to deflect it away. Well, I go to deflect it away. It hits Mike Bossy right in the foot. He now goes in on a breakaway and scores a goal. And it's one of those plays I look back and I go, I wouldn't change anything. I was doing what I was supposed to do, but Mike Bossy found a way to get it done. And again, because he did it all the time, you can't say he was lucky. He just found a way to do it. And I think that's like with Potvin shooting the puck up. He knew that with Mike Bossy. He knew that Bossy, it's like a quarterback throwing the ball to a great wide receiver. Even if he's covered, you throw it up there knowing that he's going to find a way to come down with it. And that was Bossy. So he was, yeah. I mean, I didn't play against Lafleur that long. It was at the end of his career. So, but as far as having that ability to just find a way to get it done, Mike Bossy was at that. Yeah, I can't think of anybody that was better than he was at that.
Right. Quick about Gretzky. What's it like playing with that guy?
Unexpected how great it was. I played against him as kids growing up. I grew up in Brampton. He grew up in Brantford. I think 50 miles away from each other. He was 2 or 3 years younger, but because he was so good, he would come up with, I guess, this. And even at that point, like when he was like 14, we were trying to run the crap out of him, And you could get him once in a while, but he even then. So there's a whole bunch of things. There was like not just his play on the ice, but his how he remembers the game. So we're training camp in LA. I'm on the bus after practice, whatever. Back in those days, they had a cooler of beer up front, and I'm sitting at the back. The old guys go to the back, and Wayne gets on the bus. There's hardly anybody else on the bus at this point. Grabs a six-pack, and he starts walking back towards me. I'm thinking, oh God, did I do something wrong? I'm going to get traded or whatever. But he just wanted to come back and chat, and he started talking about those days that we played against each other as kids. And he was remembering guys that I played with that I couldn't remember. Like he was bringing up these names, and they were just good guys who were good players, but random guys who really never played in the NHL or anything. He remembered all these guys, and I remember sitting there thinking, wow, this is unbelievable. And that's really what you came to learn with Wayne, that he was the whole package. Is how he treated reporters, how he treated his teammates, fans, his perception of who he was in the game, his legacy, and then obviously the on-ice play. And he understood too that on ice, you kind of got to get used to playing with him, because at first, like you've seen this sometimes, I think with the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, where everybody thinks, okay, you defer to him to get it done. Like when you're on the ice, I've got to get the puck to Wayne, right? Because he's supposed to have the puck all the time. Well, he can't have the puck all the time. There are other people checking him, And you come to realize that, I mean, one time in our own end, I went to shoot one of the early games playing with him, shot the puck around the boards like I do all the time, and Winger's going to pick it up. And Wayne was on the boards at that time, which he usually wasn't. He's a centerman. It just wasn't where he played. He played in the middle of the ice. And I shot the puck around. Defenseman came barreling down, took the puck off Wayne. And I realized it's not Wayne's fault. That's not what Wayne does. Wayne can't do everything. He's not a shot blocker. He's not a fighter. But he just was so on and off the ice, loved to be with the boys, having a few beers. It's just amazing how, and even, there's a famous story we played, Robbie Ftorek was coaching, and I loved Robbie. But he wasn't suited to coach Wayne. Robbie was disciplined, 45-second shifts. Wayne was, okay, I want to win. I'm Wayne Gretzky. If I need to stay on for 3 minutes, I'm staying on. And it wasn't selfish for Wayne to stay on for 3 minutes. He thought he had something going. But we were playing a game in Detroit, and we're up in Detroit. There's a young goalie, I think it's Mark Fitzpatrick, just coming up, supposed to be a young prospect goaltender. I think we're winning like 8-0 or something. And Wayne, in the second period, late in the second period, turns the puck over. They go down and score, and Rue the kid's shutout. Now Wayne's mad at himself that he did this, and he skates down, he breaks his stick over the back of the net. Now Robbie had a rule that if you lose your temper in that way, then now he's going to bench you. That was Robbie's rule. And he followed through his rules. So we come in the locker room, and again we got this veteran team. John Tonelli's there, Larry Robinson, Dave Taylor, myself, all these guys that have been around. And when the rumor starts going around that Robbie's going to bench Wayne. Now it was hilarious because we're all like little kids. We've all seen so much stuff before in the NHL. This wasn't that well. It was shocking, but it was almost like, okay, here's another thing on the list of amazing things that we
Right.
see. So we go up. We go up for. I remember laughing. Like I mean, Larry Robinson, and he was fantastic. But he was like a little kid. He was giggling too. We're like, come on, this is. He's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. So we go out there, and Robbie doesn't play Wayne. So we get about halfway through the third period. Mike Krushelninski leans back to Robbie and goes, "Robbie, you have got to put him on the ice." But at that point, it was a no-win situation for Robbie. Right? He puts him on the ice. Now it looks like he's going against his rule. So at the end of the game, in the old was it the Spectrum back then, or no, the Joe Louis Arena, and so there was two hallways, one for the home team where they had their locker rooms, one for the visitors, and there was one room that was like more of the visitors, was a nicer room. Then there's other rooms that were kind of off to the side, and Wayne took Robbie down the hallway, thinking that nobody was going to hear their conversation. But it was loud enough. It was these cinder blocks, so they just carried their conversation. And Robbie says to Wayne, 20,000 people came to watch me play. They didn't come here to watch you coach. And again, Wayne went out of his way to make sure, to hope anyways, that nobody could hear it. Ultimately, we all heard it. And once Wayne found out that everybody heard it, he was generally like he really liked Robbie. Robbie was just the wrong coach for Wayne, and Wayne was the wrong player for Robbie. So like he wasn't trying. In fact, he went out of his way to try to not embarrass Robbie. But it was, you're hearing Wayne Gretzky do that.
It's always great hearing about the passion of Wayne too. Like everybody you ever mentioned Wayne too, and they talks about like nobody wanted to win more than that guy.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
he run through a wall for his team, do anything it took. And it's amazing, what he was. I don't want to say frail, but he was a skinny, normal looking guy who dominated one of the most physical sports in the world.
And you know what? He loved it. Like when I talk about great players like the Dave Taylors, the Phil Espositos, the Larry Robinson, those kind of guys, the one thing they had in common was they really just loved playing, like practices, games. And Wayne was definitely at the top of that pile. Like we'd have practice. When he came to LA, I mean, he'd won cups already, MVP. He's Wayne Gretzky. He could float in practice if he wanted to, but not just not float. He was like one of the hardest workers. And we'd all go out for, like back in those days, he loved this too. We'd all go out for beers together. But he made sure when he got to practice the next day, he was the hardest worker on the team. And you're out there saying to yourself, listen, this is a blast. I'm playing with Wayne Gretzky. We went for beers last night. Now we're at practice. And he's working his ass off. Well, I better make sure I'm working my ass
Right.
off.
He set the example.
Yeah, he was incredible. But Larry Robinson was like that too. As much as Wayne was fantastic, for me being a defenseman, I know there's Bobby Orr and Dennis Botford and everything, but to me, Larry Robinson, he can just do everything: hit, fight, power.
Oh my God, he's got to be top 5 of all time.
Totally.
I don't care what anybody says. He shit kicked Dave Schultz.
Yeah.
He puts up 20 goals a season. Yeah. He wins Stanley Cups. He's the ultimate leader. There's nobody that can say that he's not top 5 of all time.
We were playing. It was when Herbie was there, obviously, because Ray Rutsalainen was on the team, and Larry was on the ice for Montreal at the time. And Ray Rutsalainen could beat anybody. He was going 100 miles an hour. Went around Larry. I don't know if they scored or not. And the Montreal Forum started booing Larry Robinson. And I remember sitting on the bench thinking to myself, what are you people doing? This is Larry Robinson. You're booing him. Larry. So it's probably like my 3rd or 4th year. I was assistant captain. I think Bob Gainey was a captain with Montreal. Larry was assistant. Something happened during the game. The captains that are on the ice then go with the referee to center ice or some location to kind of debate. Okay, the referee gives the explanation. So Larry and I were the 2 captains on the ice. So we go to the center ice, and I think it was Dave Newell or I can't remember, some veteran referee. And so we're at center ice, and I know I'm standing there with Larry Robinson, but I don't want to look at him. I don't want to. It's like I want to ask for his autograph still. And all of a sudden, I hear this chirping to my left, and I'm looking at the referee, and there's nobody else around, and I'm thinking, is Larry Robinson chirping me? And he's beside me, and he's going, like, I look at him, he goes, what do you want, old man? And he's got this shit-eating grin on his face. Now the referee knows can see what's going on. They interact. He's watching this whole thing. I look at the referee, and he's dying laughing. I turn to Robinson, I says, who the fuck are you calling old man? And he just turns around and skates away, and I'm thinking, Like that was one of the coolest things that did after me, that kind of interaction. So he was like, then when he got to LA, is he at the end of his career, but still, one of the reasons I really admire those guys too, those great players. I mean, obviously they had to establish themselves as great players to get away with this, but they were the kind of guys, like Larry had this thing where he would come around the back of our net in our own zone, and he would fire the puck up the middle of the ice trying to hit somebody for a breakaway. And our team was Robitaille or Gretzky or whoever it was. And sometimes it would get picked off, and the other team would go in and either score or have a great scoring opportunity. And everybody's like, oh, God, he's not going to do that again. Next shift, go out there and do the exact same thing. Just do it harder. And again, you can't do that when you're a rookie player and you haven't established yourself. But he wasn't afraid, and Wayne was the same way, definitely. And all these great players, Espo was the same way. They weren't afraid to make mistakes. In fact, they knew they were going to make it. Wasn't always going to work for them, but they were still willing to go make that effort because they were wanting to help their team win, and they weren't going to help their, like Tom Laidlaw. I couldn't make that play. That wasn't my job. But Larry Robinson, Wayne Gretzky, Phil Esposito, that was their job to try to make that stuff happen. So they were fun guys. I mean, we're, a little bit of a funny story. My first training camp, first or second training camp, we were up in Hull, Quebec. Wayne had some buddy guy who ran a junior team up there in Hull. So we had training camp there. So the first day of training camp, we have our physicals. Then we have some time off, and then there's a meeting later on at night. So, like the good Canadian lads we were, the whole team went to a local, the Canadian Ballet, a little strip joint. So we got, and again, it was one of those scenes that was just hilarious. So we're, again, all the same guys, the Tonellis, the Roberts, we're all in this, like, it was one of these champagne rooms, this really fancy room. So so all these other guys are outside in the main part of the place, and all the dancers are in this room with us. And somebody, I won't tell who it was, took off, the girl had taken off her panties, and they took there's a camera in the room, they took the panties and put it over the camera so nobody see what's going on. So we're sitting in there having a few beers during the day. Now we've got to go back for this meeting at night with Rogie Vachon. Now Rogie, one of the nicest guys, soft-spoken, well-respected guys. And I remember, like, we were there for a couple of hours, and Timmy Waters and I are sitting by each other, and we go, Timmy, we shouldn't be doing this. And he turns to me and goes, yeah, but we're with Wayne. And I don't want to paint the picture that it was disrespectful. It was the end of the summer, first day of training camp. It was a great time to bond the guys.
Team bonding, right.
So we go back for the meeting for Rogie, and now you got all these guys that are in the 30s and 40s, and they've been having a few beers, and they're just giggling, laughing, and poor Rogie's trying to have this meeting. And we apologized to him later on, but it was just, and again, it was a great bonding thing, kind of at the expense of Rogie. But again, we pulled Rogie into it after to let him know that we weren't trying to be disrespectful to him, but it was good bonding thing.
Anytime you can be in a strip club with Wayne Gretzky, I think it's a great story. I'm gonna wrap up a little bit. I just got one last question for you. We can always come back if you like doing this with me.
Love doing it.
If you have a position with the New York Rangers current team, you're the general manager. How do you fix this defense right now? They're giving up 50 shots a game. They're not physical whatsoever. The team seems like offensively they're going to straighten out. We know that the Mika Zibanejets aren't going to continue not to be going. Trocheck's going to get going. Reputation alone says that's going to fix itself. But the defense has become a major concern. Guys like K'Andre Miller, this is my opinion, not yours. K'Andre Miller is the softest New York Ranger defenseman since Willie Huber. He's 6'6". Last night was a perfect example. He has a guy 5'9" going down the boards, and late in the third period, he goes to throw a hip check. He made contact, and the 5'9" guy went right through him and cut in on a 2-on-1. How do we fix this right now? What's a suggestion maybe, or something you might try if you were running the D to get this straightened out?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that a good defense is not just a defenseman. It's all guys on the ice, including the goaltenders. Like, and I say including goaltenders, Quick and Shesterkin are the best duo in the league. I don't think there's any question about that. But you see a lot of times where, like, are they communicating enough? So let's say there's a 2-on-1 coming down. The defenseman's job is to make sure that puck, once it goes to the outside, it stays to the outside. And the goaltender knows then that, okay, I trust that defenseman to make sure that pass is not coming across for a one-timer. Therefore, I can come out and play the shot. So it really turns into a 2-on-2, that kind of coordination. And that goes throughout the whole ice, the back checking part of it, blocking shots. This team is designed, and I see why Miller gets a lot of criticism. He's not, but he is what he is. He's a big kid who's physical, could skate, but he is not a really aggressive guy. You just don't see that in him. And I don't know whether, I don't. You can change that, but deep down inside, that's who he is. I guess if he was playing better offensively and contributing more, which he was there a couple of years ago, was starting to rush the puck more, then you could say, okay, like Adam Fox, you don't expect Fox to be hitting people on the boards necessarily, right? He's that get it and go kind of defenseman. But I do think it's an overall team attitude. It seems like where it's more that like if you watch Florida play, like Florida when they won the President's Trophy, 3 years ago, or whatever. Their general manager there made the decision. Listen, it's great we won the President's Trophy, but we're not designed to win the Stanley Cup. He went and changed. Obviously the ability to go get Kachuk really changes your lineup. That doesn't happen all the time. You get a player like that. And I think it's starting to look like that's the way the Rangers are. That they're a fantastic bunch. Like I've been at a few events with Chris Kreider, great guy, totally dedicated, great team player. He gets a lot of heat too because he can show sometimes how great he can be, but it doesn't always show up, right? It doesn't always happen. So the whole Trouba stuff about trading him, and whenever, like Zibanejad, unfortunately for him, like he's in that role where people look to him, like he's the number one centerman. He's one of the leaders on the team, but he's not, and nobody is, but he's not Mark Messier, right? He doesn't have that kind of mentality. He's, in fact, totally opposite. He's a skill guy, but he doesn't stand like, there's that famous video from a couple of years ago where I think it was in Boston, wherever it was, he's looking at the iPad, kind of getting down at himself.
And Kreider smashed it.
Right. Like that kind of stuff where, you want somebody to get, like a couple years, remember, was it 2 years ago they played Jersey in the playoffs, got beat out by Jersey in the first round? Remember there's a play, who's the kid they traded, like going waivers to San Jose, just came back.
The center. Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank right now. Give me a second.
The grinder, yeah.
Goodrow, Barclay Goodrow.
Yeah. So remember, as a big defensive for New Jersey, was hammering a couple of guys. Goodrow, way out of his weight class, goes and grabs the guy, starts a fight, and then you can tell he's turning to the bench to say, okay, like very often a guy will do this. Okay, let's get going. Like I've done, and the team didn't respond. It seems like there's a like again, they're fantastic athletes. They're just the Rangers like it. Like if you had a daughter, you'd want Mika Zibanejad to come home, and say, listen, I'm going to marry your daughter, right? That doesn't always equate to winning hockey teams, right? So it's, I would say, to me, it's not like an individual player thing. It's like
team mentality.
Yeah, it's that I don't see that really. Like again, it's easy to look at Tampa now. Or I'm not Tampa. I should have said Florida. It's easy to look at Florida now. They won the cup. But every team that wins a cup, whether it's you go back to Vegas or Tampa or Washington, they have an edge to them. Yes, there's skill on that team. They have to have goaltending, they have to have goal scoring, but there's an edge to them. There's like, it's like Ovechkin going over to Fleury when they're playing against Vegas in the warm-ups and tapping them on the pads just to piss them off, right? Like that kind of stuff, just to get. They even saw that, who's the quarterback for Tampa the other day that playing against the Jets?
Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, it does that stuff like that. Although you don't like it, it's kind of cocky, but it's that attitude, and it's
to fire up the team.
Yeah, so that's.
What bothers me with the New York Rangers, and again, this is my opinion. I don't want to put anything on you. I know you're connected to the organization. You have a kid like Matt Rempe. Yep. This kid steps on the ice, 20,000 New York Ranger fans go crazy. He doesn't have to do anything. Yeah. He gets that crowd pumped up by stepping on the ice. You have Edstrom, 6'7". You have a bullet, and this is something the Rangers have done for the last 15 years. The Rangers have a gun that they carry without bullets in it.
Yeah, I know.
They wait to react instead of act. Rempe comes out. Now, Rempe is a Gerard Gallant player. If Gallant was still coaching the Rangers, Rempe would be playing a regular shift. If you watch Rempe in Hartford, which I do, I watch every single Ranger prospect. I have satellite dishes all over my house, 8 TVs, all hooked up to different networks. Matt Rempe goes to Hartford. He stands in front of the net. He's tipping pucks in. He's getting breakaways and finishing. His call last night. Did you watch the game last night?
I didn't. I missed it. No.
Okay, so he gets called for a rough early in the third period, where the player from St. Louis fires the puck down the ice, turns, and as he turns, Rempe hits him. It's a 1 second thing. Bam. Yep. He's called for a penalty, which I think it's a reputation penalty.
Absolutely.
But that's an excuse for a guy like Peter Laviolette to say, I'm not playing this kid anymore.
Right.
it's early in the season. This is where I think you develop a player for the playoffs. Rempe and the Rangers were 6-0 last year in the first 6 games of the playoffs. With Rempe in the lineup, they took Rempe out and replaced him with Hedel. They lost the next 2 games.
Right.
There's a thing that I'll never forget. Teammates telling me, and guys like Chris Kostopoulos, Ron Greschner, and guys that I'm close with saying, when you have a Nick Fotiu on the ice, you're 6 inches taller. When you have a Barry Beck on your defense, the reason Rayo Ritsolenen was able to be Rayo Ritsolenen is because if you touched fucking Rayo, Barry killed you.
Totally. Well, I remember listening, and it's a great. I'll come back to Rempe, but it's great you mentioned Nick Fotiu. I watched an old series we played against the Islanders, and I was on the ice. Andre Dory and I were out there against Tonelli, Nystrom all the time. I think they had Wayne Merrick as their centerman. So Herb put Nicky Fotiu on the ice. Now, sometimes, Nicky's an excitable guy. He's running around, sometimes out of position. But by him being on the ice, Nystrom didn't do anything, right? So you kind of, although maybe you lost a little bit with Nicky running around, but they lost because now they have one of the most important guys in their run there scoring big goals. Nystrom wasn't doing anything. So Rempe can do that. Now, the game has changed. Here's the rub, though. The game has changed where the problem has been created. He's like you can't miss him on the ice. He's such a big figure. And like you said before, his reputation is that he was running guys. So he's going to get those penalties like you outlined last night, where he probably doesn't deserve. Like another guy could do it and he wouldn't get a penalty, but Rempe does. Now, you would like to think over time, if he plays more and keeps his elbows down, doesn't fight all the time, he won't get those penalties all the time. The referees are going to say, okay, he's learned the game better. He's more under control. But to me, it isn't just the fight, because there isn't many guys around the league to fight anymore, right? I mean, there's Tom Wilson, there's the guy in Philly, I guess the guy in Columbus, but there's not many. Most teams they're going to play against, he won't find a partner to dance with. It's his attitude too. Like he's got this thing about him where he's just this big goofy kid. I mean that as a compliment to him.
He's infectious.
Yeah, he got in the fight the first time, and the interview after, he was going, "Yeah, we were throwing bombs out there." Like it's like, who talks like that?
He said Jiminy Crickets.
Yeah,
he literally said Jiminy Crickets after a fight. Like
But as a teammate, you're like, this is cool. Like he's not just, and not criticizing the other guys. They don't have that personality. They're showing up. They're doing their work. They're great players. They're hard workers, all that kind of stuff. But they don't have that attitude that he's got. So, I don't.
Tom, I worked the media for Fanatics Fest in New York City this past February. I was honored to be able to work the red carpet and do some backstage interviews and stuff. Henrik Lundqvist, Keandre Miller, Mike Richter, and Matt Rempe are the autograph signers representing the New York Rangers.
Right.
I'll give you one guess who had the longest line.
Oh, Rempe, yeah. There's no question.
Over Lundqvist and over Richter. Matt Rempe's line was twice as long. Yeah. And you want to talk about a kid, the first week in the league, most jerseys sold. Body Armor makes him a national spokesperson for their drink. Yeah. Peter Laviolette sends him to Hartford.
I know.
And I'm just saying, it's for a fan. This is me talking as a fan. I'm here. I rip Billy Smith's toupee off. My back is tattooed with Eddie Giacomin, John Davison, Steve Baker, and Jules Gratton masks. I'm a fanatic with this team. But I also understand the game. I played at a level nowhere near you guys. My brother played Canadian Junior. We've been around this game my whole life. There's a spot for the bullet that's 6'8" that can forecheck, hit, and has good hands. I'm sick of the New York Rangers, and I don't mean this at all because I love Jimmy Vesey. I think Jimmy Vesey's a key element to this team. He's a guts guy. He's got great hands. He can play first line. He can play fourth line. He's versatile. But there's a spot where you have to say, we're 20 games into the season. I got to develop this guy for the Stanley Cup semifinals where we can trust him on the ice. Yeah. And that's not going to happen playing in Hartford.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I guess one step further, I'd say it's develop an attitude. Now, is he the one that's going to lead that different attitude? It appears he's got that ability to do that. I would love to be in the locker room, spending time with the guys at practice, traveling. Like, do the guys on the team now, do they think they're playing as hard as they can? Do they think, so we're saying we'd love to see the team be more physical, right? Be more gritty. Like, it isn't even like, it's not, I know you're saying the same thing. It's not necessarily the fighting. I don't think that matters anymore. It's the competing, the hitting, the blocking shots. Do the guys on the team really feel like they are that team? Or do they realize they're not that team and they're waiting for somebody else to lead the way? Now, and then if they're waiting for somebody else to lead the way, is there anybody else on the team that has that personality? It doesn't. And again, love Kreider, love Zibanejad. They don't seem to have that personality where they're gonna, uh, you know, you know, get everybody else wound up. But Rempe can. It seems like he's got that ability. Listen, he's playing at the Garden, and people can talk. Sometimes players say, "Listen, I don't really listen to what the crowd is saying at the Garden." Yeah, you do. You can't help but listen. Like when the Garden, the Madison Square Garden erupts. I remember going out on the ice like before a big game against the Islanders or something, and the crowd's going nuts. Like if you didn't get goosebumps, there's something wrong. You can't.
Right. Absolutely.
And the downside of that too is, and this is one of the things as young players you need to get used to, especially at Madison Square Garden. It's all home rinks, but at MSG in this case, probably even more so, where the Ranger fans, as you know, love the Rangers so much. Like there's those die-hard fans. They live and die with the Rangers. So when things aren't going well, it's this feeling that comes over the Garden. There may be a couple of people yelling or whatever, but it's just this disappointment. You could feel it in the air. There's just no way about it. But it's not like the fans are against you. In fact, they're with you so much. They're living and dying with you. So if something goes
Right.
wrong in the game, and it's first when you're a young guy, you're feeling like, oh God, I don't want the fans to hate me. So I'm just not going to do anything. I don't want to stand out. But then once you come to realize is, no, listen, you can make a mistake at the Garden. If you're giving 100% effort and you make a mistake, okay, they're not going to be happy, but they're going to love you because you're just working so hard. I hear that all the time from Ranger fans, right? It's like, listen, I just wish they'd work. And I didn't realize, even for me going back, that's what people talk about all the time, that I just showed up and worked hard all the time. They didn't talk whether I was skilled or not. It was just that I showed up and worked. So Rempe can certainly can change that for him. I really, you kind of wonder it because it has been, after they had the brawl when Gorton got fired and Davidson got fired and Tom Wilson did his thing and threw guys around the ice, it appeared they really, okay, they got the message. They need to change this. And
They went and got Ryan Reeves,
yeah,
and Tom Wilson didn't throw a check against the Rangers for an entire season.
yeah.
He did nothing.
Yeah. And now have we kind of slipped back to being that old team again that doesn't have that toughness? And again, it's like, again for me, it's different because again, I'm not in the locker rooms now. Um, we in our locker room then it was, even if you didn't say anything, like if you were getting pushed around, especially at home, that was we didn't even like listen. We were playing for the fans, obviously, but even for ourselves, we just
Right.
we were embarrassed like to get pushed around. I remember playing in LA. We're playing against Hartford, some random game. Gretzky was there, no, but we had an off first period. It wasn't that great, and I knew enough. I'm a veteran player, so we were killing the penalty late in the period, and I ran everybody I could. I had like 3 or 4 big hits, so the crowd's going nuts and everything like that. It was funny because now we come into the locker room, and Rick Wilson, who was a great assistant coach, he's mad because nobody shows up, and he says only one guy showed up tonight. And all the guys are looking at Laidlaw like, "Oh, you kiss ass," But it was kind of like I knew enough that was part of my role. That the team, we had a flat period. It's no big deal. We have flat periods. We got to do something about it. You got to change it, and that's what you want to see happen with the Rangers here a little. But when they have that, like I saw the quotes by Lavalette this morning. They were talking about how they got scored on early in the third period, and there really wasn't much of a reaction after that. It just they kind of let it snow.
They had 2 shots on net and going into the 18-minute mark of the third, and they were down 1.
Yeah.
There's no fight. There's no grit. The Ranger difference is, and again, this is not a shot at anybody, but you take a Hedel over a Kachuk in the draft. There's an organizational difference there.
Well, I tell you that is part of it. They it's like all sports. When people talk about developing players, like you talk about Daniel Jones with the Giants, you look at the Detroit Lions right now in the NFL, and it's who you draft and the culture that you built with that team. So I admire the Detroit Lions because I watched them how they've developed that team since Dan Campbell and the new general manager came in there, and a lot of it is they built this culture. So when they got like Jared Goff from LA, for example, everybody's like, oh God, he's not that good, he's an average. But they built a culture around him and built him up where now he's like this ultimate warrior now, right?
Right.
And I think that's part of it too. So you've got to draft the players that you think fit into your culture, but then again, you've got to develop that culture. Like you've got to know that when somebody walks in that locker room, like Boston Bruins had it for many years, there was Zdeno Chara and Patrice Bergeron leading the way. So when you walk in that locker room and you see those two guys, Bergeron's playing with broken ribs, punctured lung, and Chara, the way he trains all the time, broken jaw, he continues playing. So you walk in that locker room, that's what you see. That's how you got to respond when you play. And I think you look at all successful teams in all sports, maybe not as much baseball, but baseball too. But it's like the footballs and the hockey, so it's competitive sports, and it's building that culture. So when somebody walks in the locker room, they know what's expected of them. And again, that's the thing with the Rangers. Okay, what is their culture? What have they missed? Did they try to build this culture? Did they try to build another culture and it hasn't worked out? And again, that's like Chris Drury, and that will let them know that. So.
I'm going to end with a story, and I think you must have heard this probably 100 times because you're obviously played with Wayne and you know Wayne. The Islanders beat the Oilers right before the Oilers dynasty begins in the finals, and Wayne's sitting in the locker room and they're looking at each other and they're talking and they're like, Wayne says to Dave Semenko and Mark Messier, "It's really quiet over there. What do you think's going on?" And they walk down the hallway in the Nassau Coliseum, and the Islanders are sitting with the cup in the middle of the room, but they got ice packs on. They're getting trainer treatments. They're not drinking. They're not celebrating over excessively. And Wayne looks at Mark and says, "We didn't play hard enough to win this. We have to go harder next year. If we're able to walk out of this building like we are right now, we didn't play hard enough to win the cup." And that's missing right now in that organization.
I hadn't heard that story, but that doesn't surprise me a bit. I was lucky. I played with Bob Bourne and John Tonelli out in LA there, and got to know that with them. I'm actually really good friends with Tonelli now. I'll be quick. You want to run, but Doug Gilmour is a good example for me. You played against him in the regular season. People may not remember him that much, but really a great warrior. Dave Taylor in LA was the same way. You play the regular season games, they'll compete. They're great leaders, competitors, all that kind of stuff. You get in the playoffs. And all of a sudden, like Dave Taylor with like Speary or something like that, and you're going, what are you doing? And he wanted to win. He wasn't going to wait.
It's Gilmour and Messier in the Ranger Devil series that year. I thought one of them was going to die.
Yeah.
Gilmour backed down to Messier. Never.
Yeah.
Never. And Mark Messier is an intimidating son of a bitch.
I've heard Wayne say this, and this is very cool. When I saw Mark Messier say this, he says, "You need to take away their will." So it's not just beating them. It's now, if you're winning the game, now you take away their will. And you watch him when he played, he would do things that were unnecessary, but then you think, okay, now you're thinking, we again, go back to that series when it was LA, we were down 3-1 to Edmonton. Tim and Tom were on there.
Tim and Tom.
Yeah, Tim and Tom. And they used to play Norm Lacombe and Craig Simpson against us all the time. And you could tell the coaches had said to them, run those two guys, run Laidlaw and Waters every time you're out there. So, like, first, again, we get down 3-1, and they were running the crap at us. Like, we couldn't move. They were all over us. And we finally were playing a game up in Edmonton. I'll never forget it. And there's a scrum happened. So there's Lacombe, Simpson for them, Tim and Tom for us. We're all yapping each other. And we looked, I can't remember who said it. One of them, Tim and I said, "Listen, you run us again, and you're going to pay." And so the first one, Lacombe went to hit Timmy Waters. Timmy Waters submarined him, and Lacombe goes head first into the boards. Right after that, it's a great video of it. I had the puck. Simpson's coming towards me. I put the puck into my feet to make it look like I could get my elbow up. So I put my elbow up right when he was coming to hit me, just smoked him, knocked him down. They never ran us again after that. We took their will away after. So it was, but you're right. It's, if you want to win the Stanley Cup, it is guys talk about it all the time. And again, no one born in Tonelli, talking to them about it too, it kind of go back to your story, but Wayne said, it's great to win it, but it's almost like, oh, thank God it's over with, because the physical grind and the mental grind too is just unbelievable. But we got to the semifinals twice. And it was fantastic. That's the one thing you look back at when you didn't win it. It's not just the fact that you didn't win the trophy, but you didn't get a chance to test yourself with about 25 other guys to go through that grind where it's just like the Patrice Bergeron's playing with the broken ribs and that kind of stuff. It sounds kind of strange, right? But you look back at that stuff and you go, "Oh man, I wish I could have played with broken ribs in the Stanley Cup Finals."
Right. Just to get to that final, no matter what, it's every kid's dream,
Yeah, totally.
Well, last question of the interview. I end everyone with this. Tom.
Yep.
Pizza. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Never. That is just sacrilegious. God, no way. It's
Good answer.
It's like voting for Kamala Harris.
Good answer. Double good answer there. Yeah. I tell you what, if I was Rempe, I'd tell the Rangers to throw number 47 on his back, and the Garden crowd will really go nuts.
I'm going to tell you, one of the funniest things now is these athletes are getting up to the Donald Trump dance. Oh, man, that's classic.
I love it.
Oh,
I love it.
Yeah. Good. We can go on forever if you want. We'll do it again.
I had love to have on again. Let's go on after the All-Star break and do a little season recap and talk some more stories. And maybe we get Gresh to come on with us.
Yeah, that'd be funny. Yeah, tell some more stories. Him and I rooming together and stuff. Yeah, that'd be good.
I love Ronnie Greshner. I'll tell you what, that guy just means a lot. But listen, Tom, you were an idol. You were definitely one of my idols growing up. It was a privilege to get to talk to you at this extent, and I really appreciate you coming on. And let's get you back.
That was a blast. You're very good at this stuff. You're a good interviewer. Good job.
Thank you very much, Tom. Hey guys, it's the Hockey World Order. Check us out on YouTube, Hockey World Order. Check us out on TikTok and Twitter, Hockey World Order. Tom, anything you want to promote real quick?
No, I've got my book all done. It's called True Grit Life. It's completed. We're going to have publish it on Amazon. So we're going to wait. We just, when I got off Survivor, there's a lot of stuff going on in my life. So I really, that kind of stuff really obviously helps promote a book more. So when we get some more busy stuff going on, we'll get that out there. I'll notify everybody.
Let's get it on. I'm actually doing a review of Ben Wilson's book next week. I'll make sure I mention that you're a big fan of his. And we'll see you then, guys. Thank you so much, and keep watching hockey.
Great job, brother.
All right, we're done. Tom, thank you so much, man.
That was fun. I love telling those old stories. It's good.
That flew so fast too. I can't believe you did an hour and 40. I'm sorry I kept you so long.
Oh, cool, nice.
Yeah, I'm gonna upload it. I'll shoot it to you on Facebook if you want to, get it out to anything. And